All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. I think we will go ahead and get started since there's quite a few people here. So I will pass it off first to Matt to welcome us, and then we'll get started with introductions.
Hey, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining the Austin-Travis County Fall 2021 All Stakeholder Meeting. And we're really excited to talk and hear about everything that's happening in our community. There have been a lot of changes over the last year plus, and a lot of changes that are necessary, I think, to make our system and community stronger and more equitable and more representative of the people we're trying to serve here in Austin, Travis County, to end homelessness. And so we're really excited. I just want to thank you all for being here. Really hoping that soon, maybe by the spring meeting, we'll be in person and able to connect in a much more human and intentional way. But really want to thank everyone for taking time out of their day to hear about what we're doing and contribute to the work that's happening in our community to end homelessness. So Maya, thank you for a minute just to thank everyone. I do want to just say one more thing, echo staff. Today is about our community, but I really appreciate all the work, the hard work that you all are putting in behind the scenes to support the work of our community in ending homelessness. So thanks, Maya.
Thanks, Matt. And just to quickly introduce myself as well, I think many of y'all have probably gotten many emails, probably an annoying amount of emails from me thus far about the committees and this meeting today. So I appreciate you all being here and being patient with the barrage I send your way. My name is Maya Baderi. I'm the Coalition and Capacity Building Manager with ECHO. I started in June, so I'm still relatively new to ECHO and to the community. And I feel very grateful to be here with you all today to introduce, kind of formally introduce our leadership council that I've been supporting and update on some community data and other work that's been happening in our COC. So Chris, if we could move to the next slide, and we will introduce Brian Oakes and Ruth Ahern, who are the chair and vice chair of the Leadership Council, which is our COC board. So Ryan and Brian and Ruth, I will pass it over to you.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Brian Oakes, the chair for the Homelessness Response System Leadership Council, Continuum of Care, and we're really excited that you all are joining us today. And excited to talk about a lot of the changes that we're making through the Leadership Council to really address homelessness better in our community. And I'm going to turn it over to Ruth because we do have a sort of an exercise to kind of get us started, to get us going this morning. And so Ruth, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ahern, and I'm the vice chair of Leadership Council. I'm also a representative of Integral Care, and my title there is Practice Administrator of Housing and Healthcare for the Homeless Initiatives. So I am the mental health and substance use representative here with Leadership Council. So I believe we're going to go around and introduce everyone else, but also ask folks to kind of talk about the lens that they bring to this work. Are we good to get that going, Maya? Yeah. Okay, great. So thank you. I'll start with the lens I feel I bring, and I would say that's a recovery lens. And what I mean by recovery is that that's an individual's journey to well-being, right? And that is going to look different for every person involved in our homeless response system. And so I think what's important there is that means people are experts on themselves and really need their voices in our decision-making spaces. So it's important that we prioritize those voices of people with lived experience, bring them into our spaces, into our groups and committees, and follow their lead. So that's the lens that I'm bringing. Council members, I'm going to go down my list and make sure I hit every single one. So no need to popcorn amongst each other. But I will start off with Diana.
Hi, folks. My name is Diana Gray, and I serve at the City of Austin as the Homeless Strategy Officer. This is one of the standing seats on the council, and so I'm very happy to be involved. I have just been with the city for about 9 months, and before that have spent about 20 years doing affordable housing, and particularly with a focus on the development of permanent supportive housing. So that's I certainly bring that view, but also one of the sort of lenses I bring to council is really depending on the diverse membership of the group to give feedback to guide the investments that the city is making. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Quincy, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Quincy Dunlap, President and CEO of the Austin Area Urban League. And I'm happy to be a member of this council. I think that what you see before you is a diverse group of individuals who are intentionally bringing specific mindsets, focuses, and experience to make sure that we reimagine and implement new strategies to adequately and appropriately serve this vulnerable population the way it should be served, with the dignity and respect that they deserve. And it's our intention to bring forward equitable practices and actions, right? I'm happy to call these individuals my colleagues, and I'm here to serve and put the energy of the Urban League behind serving our brothers and sisters. So thank you.
Thank you, Quincy. Kathy.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Kathy Mcclarty. I am a planning manager with Travis County Justice and Public Safety. I've been with the county since 1993. First half of my career, I worked with the Juvenile Probation Department. And the second half of my career, I've been with my current division in a planning and management role. I'm here as the representative of Travis County, but more importantly, I'd like to think that I'm here to ensure that the needs of individuals with criminal histories are met when it comes to housing, and that these folks who have re-entered the community have access to fair and affordable housing like everybody else deserves. And I'm really happy to be here and enjoying this group and learning quite a bit.
Thank you, Kathy. Richard.
Good morning. My name is Richard Johnson, and I am a community health worker. Excuse me, community health worker for Dell School of Medicine, and I am a person that has experienced homelessness. And my part here on the board is to make sure those that are experiencing homelessness with multiple medical diagnoses are seen in a fair and positive light.
Thank you, Richard. Dylan.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Sorry, I'm sort of double time in another meeting right now. But it's yeah, it's great to see you all. My name is Dylan Schubitz. I'm with the Housing Authority of the City of Austin, and one of those appointed seats on Leadership Council. And yeah, it's great to see so many people here. I hope, yeah, work with you all ongoing in all the committees and workers that we're hoping to stand up. So thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Dylan. Ree.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ria Zamoris. I am, sorry, waking up. Good morning. 3 sips of coffee in. I am a Federal Technical Assistant for HUD, formerly the Austin Youth Collective Coordinator at LifeWorks. I'm in one of the like PLE seats, so people with lived expertise, lived experience, 20 plus year race equity educator and advocate. So I'm bringing a framework here of not what does it look like when a community is able to shift from the concept of centering the voices of people with lived expertise to integrating the voices of lived expertise. And so that is really the framework that I bring to this work. And yeah.
Thank you, Ree. Summer.
Hello, I am Summer Wright. I sit on another one of the lived expertise seats, and I do bring that, having experienced chronic and unsheltered homelessness, from 17 to 20 something, in Austin, as well as in other cities and abroad. I've also worked in this system as well as others for several years. I thank you. And I like to think I bring a lens of the need for an intersectional equity, as a big champion of queer rights, and the rights for groups that I'm not a part of as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Summer. I love that there's Team Summer everywhere. That's exciting. Emily.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Emily Seals. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I sit on Leadership Council representing the non-HUD funded programs. I currently work with Sunrise Homeless Navigation Center and UT College of Pharmacy on a research study looking at mobile health technology with people experiencing homelessness. I have worked in Austin for the last 4 or so years and have worked throughout the country in several cities at several VA medical centers for the last 20 plus years in different homeless service capacities. So I'm happy to be here, happy to do this work and honor all of those clients that I have worked with throughout my career and those that I will continue to work alongside. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. All right, Whitney.
Hi, everyone. I'm Whitney Thurman. I am on faculty at the University of Texas School of Nursing, where I teach public health nursing and research. And my areas of interest and my experience are related to understanding and addressing how people navigate complex health and social services in order to meet their medical needs. And mental health needs. I sit in the healthcare and disability representative seat on the Leadership Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Whitney. One member is not here today, and that is Jason Phillips. And he's with Caritas of Austin, and he is on our homeless service provider HUD funded seat. And he is out of office this week. So Brian, I'm going to bring it back over to you in case there's anything you'd like to wrap up with.
Yeah, I'll go too. I didn't talk about men that
Yes.
I bring. So
share your lenses.
I'm the Chief Equity Officer for the City of Austin and started the office back in 2016. And I really got involved in this space and this role because I was getting really frustrated by showing up to a lot of meetings, a lot of strategic planning around trying to really address an issue that I felt like no one was talking about, how racialized homelessness is in our community and how disproportionately it impacts Black people in our community. And so I really bring the lens to sort of say that I don't feel like we can really solve or address homelessness if we don't talk about racism and history of our city policies and what built and designed all of the stuff that we experience today. And so I make a commitment in being in the equity seat that is on the council to really sort of help center the people directly impacted, and for us to really think about how do we sort of fix and change our systems more so than our people as we try to solve and end homelessness in our community. And so I think Maya's going to take it on next.
Thanks, Brian and Ruth and everybody. Chris, can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So just a quick recap. I think it's been kind of a whirlwind, at least for me, it's felt that way with the governance restructure. And so I just wanted to kind of level set some of the kind of main touchstones over the last 6 months or so. So this leadership council that just introduced themselves was seated in May. Between May and July, they really worked on kind of ingraining that racial equity lens that so many folks spoke to, and Brian kind of really centered as the chair. And that includes relationship building and setting values and group agreements and really being intentional about what kind of space they wanted to co-create, because that informs the structure and the processes that kind of get built out of that space. And so with all of that kind of in mind, the new governance charter was authorized in July. And then in September, two kind of really major pillars for our community's governance structure were approved. The first is the committee structure that I'm about to go into a bit more detail around. And the second is a compensation policy that seeks to compensate folks with lived experience and equity advocates who represent marginalized communities in the governance structure. And so this is really a way to do what Ree spoke to, that not just centering voices, but really integrating the expertise and the wisdom that people with lived experience and equity advocates bring by joining in and sharing power with those folks that bring that expertise, honoring that expertise by sharing decision-making power and compensating folks accordingly for the work that they do and the lens that they bring. And so that's a really big shift for our community, and I think for COC boards in general. Not many places in the country compensate folks at all, and certainly not to the extent with which folks will be compensated through this policy. It's not just hourly compensation, there's also budget line items for technology supports. We're talking about training and onboarding and providing kind of ongoing support for folks who are new to governance work to really be able to kind of authentically engage in decision making and not just fill seats. So that is kind of one of the examples of what can happen when you really infuse a racial equity lens deep into the work from the ground up. And that takes time. So I think the majority of y'all in here have probably heard my metaphor, but I'm going to go with it because I think it's useful. We are building a bike from the start, from the ground up, and we've never built bikes before. And we want to make sure that we're not building it as we're riding it, which is how we've kind of been operating. But what happens when you build a bike while riding it is you fall off your bike, or the brakes aren't tight and you end up getting hurt. We don't want people to get hurt on our bikes. So we're getting off the bikes, we're building them up from scratch, and we're writing a manual too, so that other folks can have bikes that are just as good as ours. But that requires figuring out how you build a bike, going out and buying the tools, buying the materials that we need. We might make the seat too high or put the handlebars on backwards and have to go back and redo and tweak and fix. Some kids don't know how to ride bikes, so we're going to have to teach folks how to ride bicycles. Some parents might not know how to ride bikes and feel nervous about their kids riding. So there's a lot of level setting that we have to do. We have to figure out what we know and what we don't know. And none of that means that we're going to rush the process or put kids or adults on bikes that are unsafe. And in the meantime, folks still have to get to where they need to go to. And so thinking about ride shares and carpools and making sure that streets have crosswalks and are pedestrian friendly as well while we build the bikes. And so it's a complicated process. We're not going to get everything right all the time. And I think, as you have seen from the council members here, we have a really thoughtful and intentional group of people leading this work and doing things with an equity lens throughout the entire process, which I think gives me hope, at least, that we're going to get a lot right, even if we inevitably don't get everything right and have to go back and tweak with humility and with collaboration with all of you. So, Chris, can we go on to the next slide, please? So with that being said, we're not the first people to build bikes, and we can learn from what has worked in the past and what has not. So this is the governance structure as has been passed by Leadership Council. Again, some things will get tweaked, some things have probably just been forgotten or missed and will get added as y'all provide your feedback. This is by no means etched in stone. And you'll see in this structure that there's a lot of things that are familiar from the old structure under Membership Council. Again, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, even when building a new bike. So the permanent housing committee, the crisis response committee, the equity committee have existed in different forms for quite a while now. Performance monitoring and systems improvement are new committees that the Leadership Council created in thinking through kind of the needs and gaps in our system and what makes sense in terms of bringing in as kind of an overall lens over the work groups underneath. So the color coding here hopefully makes things a little clearer since there's a lot of boxes on the page right now. The yellow line at the top are the 5 committees that we are recruiting for right now. Part of the barrage of emails you've received from me, I'm sure, is around recruitment for these committees. So those applications, I'll put the link in the chat in a minute, and those applications will close on Sunday. After that, Leadership Council will select the folks on these committees. There are 15 voting seats per committee. So that's arithmetic that's above my head, but 15 times 5. Of those 15 seats, 3 are specifically for people with lived experience, and then an additional 3 seats specifically for equity advocates representing marginalized communities. And then underneath those 5 yellow boxes, you'll see the work groups. So the green there are permanent work groups. The teal represents ad hoc work groups that may or may not become permanent. They're kind of ad hoc based on funding and kind of the needs of the community. So pit count planning obviously is seasonal. With employment and mental health and substance use, for example, that's more ad hoc because it'll depend on the funding and the types of programs we're able to look at within the governance structure. So we'll talk a little bit more about the recruitment and how the work groups and will get seated as opposed to the committees. But for now, I just kind of wanted to share this. And then, Chris, if you could take the slides down, we're going to do a little bit of Q&A with some council members. I've gotten a lot of questions from y'all and have kind of distilled it into a list of, I think, the most frequently asked questions that we've gotten from folks in the community. So I will start with you, Diana. can you speak a bit to who funds the governance structure and who do the committees report to?
So this is a trick question because no one funds the governance structure overall. It is an unfunded HUD mandate. And so we are required to have a leadership structure of some sort for the continuum of care funding that comes down through the community. We have to be in compliance with the federal grants. And of course, the work groups will report up to the committees to the Leadership Council. But the Leadership Council itself is independent. It doesn't report to ECHO or to the city, although we do have compliance requirements related to the continuum of care funding that comes to the community. While it's not explicitly funded as a whole, the Leadership Council has authorized a compensation policy, as Maya mentioned earlier, that will compensate people with lived experience and equity advocates who aren't otherwise paid, because we know it's not enough to just invite people to the table. But when most folks historically have been there on the part of their employer in one form or another. So we're wanting to be really intentional about making sure that people with lived expertise are compensated for that expertise at the table. And that will be raised primarily from private donors and foundations. That's an ongoing process, but we are in it.
Thanks, Diana. Summer, over to you. Can you talk a bit about the scope of responsibility for the committees and the governance structure kind of as a whole? What is the scope of responsibility and what is the governance structure in charge of?
Sure. So the governance structure, the Leadership Council, otherwise known as the Homeless Response System Leadership Council, otherwise known as the HRSLC, is responsible for all projects funded by the COC and ESG grants. We oversee system-wide policy, program standards, funding priorities, and other functional aspects of the homeless response system. I know that part of the question was breaking down the committees, but I believe that's a question saved for later, so I don't want to spoil the surprise. But that is the general overview, is we are in charge of the system as a whole, which is a vague but true answer. So
thank you for being vague and true, Summer. Bree, over to you. Can you talk a little bit about how the committees and work groups were created?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So we were really intentional around this, and I think that's you'll hear a lot about our intentionality. We definitely looked at existing committees that were running under the membership council. There were some committees created by ECHO during the kind of bridge period where we were like, the work has to keep happening even as we are developing new governance and new structure. And so we pulled from both of those, as well as really identifying where gaps existed that we knew needed to be brought into our system as a whole. Maya mentioned earlier the creation of the Systems Improvement Committee. And so as we were kind of looking to develop our committees and work groups, we pulled from structures. I believe Irit said, right, we pulled from bike builders of the past and made sure that we brought in work that we know has been instrumental in ending homelessness, and just looked to bring in pieces that were missing so that we could have a more comprehensive system.
Thank you. I'm very excited my bike metaphor is continuing to be used in different spaces. Quincy, can you describe the kind of general intention of each of the 5 committees? Oh, you're on mute.
That's my MO, talk while I'm muted on these damn systems. I know we keep hearing the word intention, but intention without action is pointless. And I think this leadership council is very equity action oriented and very results and solution oriented. To that end, permanent housing's intention is to oversee development of policies and revisions for program standards for permanent housing, rapid rehousing, property engagement, and expanding opportunities for housing and navigation, and ensuring the enforcement of the Violence Against Women Protection Act. Crisis response intention is to oversee development of policies, revisions of program standards, and procurement processes of new funding related to the crisis response system. Additionally, crisis response will oversee the performance monitoring reviews. I ran over one. Performance monitoring review, and the intention is to review and improve data collection processes, including the HMIS system, and seeks continuous improvement in the performance monitoring mechanism. We'll also oversee the coordinated entry work group, the HMIS work group, and the COC NOFA and scorecard work group, and the seasonal PIT count, and the NOFA independent review teams work group. And I want people to understand that you hear a lot of acronyms, but this performance monitoring work committee ensures that the efficacy of the work has integrity. So intentionally overseeing everything, like fine tooth comb and everything. Then there's the equity committee. This group probably has the most important body of work out of all of the committees. And the intention is to analyze gaps in the system and system equity across all lines in terms of client prioritization, training for staff, leading with race, as well as additional equity lenses along gender and disability lines, as well as others. This equity committee will address these lenses through advancing equity in the system. They will also oversee policy and procedure work groups, the HRS tools work groups, and training and professional development work groups. Again, at the core of everything we seek to do is bring equity and the various lenses of equity to sight. And Summer always does a good job of keeping us there. And Brian is our resident expert, though all of us are probably experts on equity. We got some of the best equity lenses in the goddamn country on this. So expect big things from this leadership council through the equity lens. System improvement committee increases system. The intention is to increase system capacity to look at additional services beyond housing, right? So those wraparound supports and make us better connected with the system that feeds into the HRS, including the healthcare, mental health, and substance use, and the employment sector. So what you are looking at is a cross sector of the best wraparound supports that you could potentially have, right? And then I think that's it for me, unless I have, part 5 is how are the committee members going to be selected? That's not me.
Thanks, Quincy. Summer, can you speak to how the committee members are going to be selected? I know you're on the team that's involved in that process.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that this is a pretty spooky part of it, especially considering it's happening right now. Applications are still open. But essentially, first and foremost, we want to center that equity lens, especially leading with race. And we're looking at creating a governance system that represents the populations that we serve. Beyond that, we're breaking each committee down into parts, looking at the work groups underneath it, looking at the different angles of expertise that we would like to have represented among voting members. and looking at seating a diverse range within each committee's purview. And then, yeah, we on each committee, we have 3 people with lived expertise and 3 equity advocates. And on each work group, 2 people with lived expertise and 2 equity advocates. We're looking at additionally a diversity of perspectives from the larger, more traditionally enfranchised organizations, as well as looking to get smaller groups and more grassroots groups, which I know there are mixed feelings about the term, into these spaces, but getting a diversity of perspectives and making sure that we have representation from the more typically enfranchised groups alongside some fresh voices. Beyond that, yeah, I had something else to say and I'm blanking in front of 137 people. But hopefully this answered it. And if I think of anything extremely important, I will drop it in the chat.
Thanks, Summer. I appreciate that. I know there have also been some questions about the limited number of voting members on the committees and kind of where that decision came from and whether that will limit all participation on the committees. Quincy, could you speak to that a little bit? Why the limited number of voting members was kind of introduced to the committees?
Yep, I did it again. I think what we have to understand here is the group size in relation to efficiency is something that we have to manage, because what we want to do is be most efficient and effective and intentional in what comes out of the committee structure. We do not want to have these large groups that are ineffective and inefficient. Not that large groups can or can't be. What we've made the intentional decision on is selecting the right types of individuals with the right skill sets, talents, attitudes, and mindsets for efficiency and effectiveness. What you see on this committee structure is the right balance. We speak of equity and we speak of inclusion and representation. And when you look at the committee structure that Leadership Council is putting forward, we've been very intentional in considering and including the perspectives that will move solutions forward, right? So in the past, we didn't limit voting members and we didn't limit committee sizes. These things will be open, but to be most efficient and effective, we've went through an intentional selection process, again, to include the right types of people with the right types of experience, mindsets, and attitudes toward the work. That's not to say that brothers and sisters who want to participate don't have it. The group before you went through a vetting process, right? And so that it is smoothly, so that it gets us to smooth decision-making and action based on those decisions, there was a size limit process that we undertook together. This is not something that was decided in a vacuum. This is something that we as a committee, and believe me, we fight, but the fight is right. This is one case where the fight is right. And I like my fights that I have with these brothers and sisters. And I like the fights that I don't have with them. I like the fights that we fight together. So again, this committee structure will get us to the place to where this system focuses and serves with excellence. And that is what we are here to do through a big, big lens of equity and considering the people with lived experience. Those are the most important stakeholders here, regardless of whatever else you may hear. The people with the lived experience are our primary stakeholders. If I'm saying something wrong, one of my team members, please correct me.
Thank you, Quincy. I really appreciate that. And just to piggyback off that, the committee meetings will be open. In a second, we'll speak a bit to leadership council meetings not having been open until now, but committee meetings certainly will be open. And so whether or not you're selected as a voting member, you will have access to these meetings as well as work group meetings. So once committees and work groups are seated and scheduling is finalized, I will post a kind of calendar of all of the different governance meetings happening with Zoom links, so everyone will be able to attend. The voting membership is really limited to the final decisions on passing policies or program standards, budget priorities, things like that. Again, as Quincy said, for efficiency and to ensure equity in the lens in the actual decision-making process. Good question, Rocky. Yes, these meetings will be virtual for the foreseeable future. I think as the COVID situation kind of remains a reality and numbers go up and then they go down, I think for everyone's safety and accessibility, we will be keeping things virtual for the time being. So we've spoken a lot about the committees thus far, and that's intentional, you know, because that's what we're recruiting for right now. But Diana, can you clarify how the work groups are going to be selected, who makes those decisions, and are there the same kind of limits on voting membership as the committees?
Absolutely. So I am hoping that all of you have used the link that Maya just dropped into the chat to express your interest on committees. If you haven't, go do it. While we are first recruiting and going to be placing the committee members, that form also allows folks to express interest for work groups. And so we'll seat the committees and then pass on those expressions of interest to the new committee chairs. Those chairs will be selected by the members of the committee that is seated, and together they'll then kind of determine the process for seating the work groups. Unlike committees, there's not a limit on number of voting members by work group, so that may vary some. There is a requirement, and I believe, and Maya, please correct me if I'm wrong, is our requirement within the work groups that there be 2 seats reserved for people with lived expertise. And the expectation is that there continue to be this focus on making sure that we sort of set up our work groups to center racial equity. But that process is probably a little more diverse in terms of the selection process, et cetera, because the purposes of each work group really differ. And so we're going to let the committees determine how they want to make sure that they get the representation they need there. And so again, the expression of interest is open through the 24th, along with the committee expression of interest, but work groups will also have additional opportunities to reach out to other people in the community if they feel like they need to fill out the work groups to get a good functioning team together.
Thanks, Diana. So Summer, can you speak a little bit to kind of the thinking behind setting a number of folks with lived experience on the committees and work groups? And we've been speaking a lot about representation and kind of intentional inclusion. And so why was there not a set number for people of color on committees, given the kind of overrepresentation in our in the population experiencing homelessness in our community?
Yeah, absolutely. At risk of coming across smarmy, I just want to say I love that this was a frequently asked question. And I'm proud of our community's commitment to racial equity. In response, the need to create a set number of people with lived expertise stems from the fact that we need to compensate people with lived expertise. And so in order to build out that plan, we needed to know how many people, you know, how often we were compensating. We do have seats for equity advocates. And as always, when it comes to equity, our intention is to lead with race, with an intersectional lens. And those seats are compensated as well for people who would not otherwise be paid. But truthfully, we want a governance system that is representative of the population we serve. And we know, one, that population is fluid over time. And two, that part of our recruitment and part of, the prioritization of seating, as I've stated, is to do that. And that is a commitment we've made. I think to talk about number of seats versus just getting as many people as possible is to do a disservice to the overwhelming need for this attention to equity and representation. But yeah, in terms of why specifically we outlined the lived expertise seats was partially a funding thing. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Summer. And our final question, Ree, you get the last word here. Why have the Leadership Council meetings been closed to the public, and can you speak to when they might become open?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I think this is really important, right? We lead with equity, we lead with racial equity, and the cornerstone of the work, right? So we lead with this, but, and I believe it was mentioned earlier, right? The root of our work, the heart of our work is the population that we work alongside. And in order for us to do this work well, we needed a space for authentic engagement with one another. We needed to build our relationships so that we could best serve our community. And it was really important that we had the space and the time to be able to do that. There was level setting. We needed to create like our values, our group agreements. Also, we've recently been working on NOFO, and that requires an enormous amount of focus in order to, again, serve our community as well as we possibly can. And so I think it's important to note, like, we talk often and in race equity spaces, and if any of you are in them or have been to trainings and you talk about white supremacist culture and you talk about kind of the sense of urgency being a piece of that culture. And we struggle with that being not only a part of white supremacy culture, but also a reality of our work. Our sense of urgency isn't just about culture. It's we don't want people to die outside, right? Like, we want people to have homes. And we have had to find a way as a council to bridge that sense of intentionality that is absolutely necessary for the work to happen alongside the sense of urgency that the work has to keep going forward. Our work doesn't stop. We all know that. Everyone in this room knows that. And so I wasn't told to do this, but I'd like to express gratitude to our community for the grace of allowing that space for us to build so that we can come forward to y'all and do this work well and do it with centering the values that mean the most to all of us. And also want to name that we are planning to open up the meeting. So it's not something where like y'all are never ever going to get to hear about what's going on in Leadership Council or be in the room, or there's not going to be public comment. There will be. We do not have a timeline, but we're hoping that it's going to be soon. We just are trying to tie up a few little pieces here. And in the interim, our minutes are always posted to the ECHO website. So if you are curious about what's going on and you're not able to attend right now, right, which we know you're not, always know that you can go look at the minutes on the website to just kind of get an idea, and you can reach out to any one of us with questions. We are our internal meetings currently are closed, but we are not closed. We are here. If you have questions, if you want to know things, like, hit us up. Like, we want you to know that our job is not a new council coming in and like running your community. Our job is a new council coming in and building a structure so that we can support and uplift the incredible work that all of you are doing every single day of your lives. We are not here to run the show. We are here to support the work getting done. And we know that y'all do incredible work. I mean, some of us have lived through it. I have lived through the incredible work that was done at LifeWorks as a young person who was homeless, Salvation Army, Caritas, like y'all are killing it. We are here to be your advocates, and we just need a little more time so we can make sure that we're doing this with the correct values and be value aligned. So again, we have totally agree updates. That's a good point in our chat box. To recap, we are currently closed. We will not remain closed. We do not have a timeline, but we're hoping for very soon. And you can always read our minutes, and we thank you for your patience as we are growing to build a better system together. That was a lot. I'm sorry. It's so important to me that our providers in this room know how completely valued you are, and no one wants to shut any of the work out that you're doing or shut you out. That's not what this is. And we just appreciate you all a lot for everything that you do. Yeah.
Thanks, Ree. That was maybe a lot, but certainly not too much. I appreciate you showing up this way. And I don't think I'm the only one from all the heart reactions you're getting. And I love your comment in the chat, Erin. I think having a clear communication channel between Leadership Council and not just the committees, but the community more broadly is really important and is something that is being talked about. I think one of the things Leadership Council is hoping to create, and you'll see it on the slide with the committees, the committees chart, the governance chart, is a regular either quarterly or monthly all stakeholders meeting to occur kind of not in this format of like the twice a year HUD kind of all stakeholders meeting, but a more informal space for updates and kind of relationship building and communication. And so that will be forthcoming. And I will certainly keep y'all in the loop and communicate when any decisions and scheduling is done. I feel like I had another thing to say, but that I will leave it at that for now. Oh, my other thing I wanted to say, sorry, is I will also be sending out a survey in the coming weeks to just get a bit more kind of input from you all on how you'd like to see this space looking moving forward. I think in the past, all stakeholder meetings, from what I've been told, haven't been to one in this community before this one, have kind of been similar to this format of y'all kind of getting information thrown at you and talked at. And I would love to see more kind of collaboration and connection and interaction in this space, which is limited with 130 something people in the room, but we may not be virtual forever. And there's certainly some technology we can use to break us out into smaller groups. So I will be reaching out to you all as well for suggestions or thoughts you may have on how we can use the space as a community space moving forward. But for now, I will pass us over to Claire and Mason from ECHO's Research and Evaluation team to go over some community data.
Thank you, Maya. Just it's nice to be here. It's nice to see you all. Wanted to thank Maya and Leadership Council for providing us a little bit of space in this meeting to present on some of the work that our team has been doing. My name is Akram Al-Turk. I'm the Director of Research and Evaluation at ECHO, and we've been working on a few reports in the last few months and a dashboard. And we wanted to just give you a little bit of high-level overview of some of those findings and what we've been working on. And that's it. I'm going to pass it over to Claire and Mason to introduce themselves and to go through the presentation. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Maya, and thanks, Akram. My name is Claire Burris, and I'm one of the research and evaluation analysts here at ECHO. And I'm going to be walking you guys through some of our community data updates today, alongside my colleague Mason, who I will allow to introduce himself.
Hey y'all, I'm Mason Turpin, just another research and evaluation analyst at ECHO.
Awesome. Thanks, Mason. All right, so we're going to start our brief overview of our community data today by just discussing the system first and then going into the people that are moving through our system. So an update as of 2020 is that it was, we noticed that in our system data, clients who accessed coordinated assessments, so entered to that front door to the homelessness response system, had been already experiencing homelessness for a longer period of time than in the year prior. And, we can't know exactly why that's going on, but that is, probably related to the year 2020, the impact that the pandemic had on our economy here locally and our housing market, and so that is something that our system needs to be responsive to, is that we've got a population that has been experiencing homelessness for a longer period of time overall, and the needs that come with that. And we also noticed that although the period between homeless start date and coordinated assessment was longer, the actual period between coordinated assessment and getting connected to a permanent housing program was shorter. So we do see that as a win for our system, in not causing further delays for people to get into the housing that they so need. Also want to note, while we're talking about assessments and people moving through that coordinated entry system, that as of very recently here in our system, as I'm sure many of you are very aware, we have adopted a new coordinated assessment tool. And so this tool is called the Austin Prioritization Index. There's lots of resources to learn more about this tool that we are going to provide to you today. But I just want to touch on that our prior tool, which is the VI SPDAT, scored both Black clients and Hispanic and Latinx clients lower than white clients overall, which means that relatively these clients experienced a lower level of prioritization in coordinated entry. And now with our Austin Prioritization Index, we're seeing that Black and Hispanic and Latinx clients are now scoring higher on our coordinated assessment, and therefore are relatively higher prioritized in our coordinated entry system. And all of the credit for this work goes to our equity committee, who have been incredible advocates for pushing for this to happen in our system since December 2019, and we've really just gotten to see this come to fruition recently, and we're really proud of this in our community. So the Austin Prioritization Index was developed through a process of piloting, testing, analyzing pilot data, providing recommendations, and then a process of proposals and approvals. And we see this as a continuous improvement cycle that we're going to continue in an ongoing way. The committees, that whole committee structure that our amazing colleagues just went over earlier in today's meeting, are all going to be involved in some way in this continuous improvement cycle. And we will always be piloting new questions out of the equity committee. That's something that we've really committed to, and our team will stay committed to doing the analyses of that pilot data and making sure that we're always updating this tool to become better and more equitable and more reliable for our community. So we did see that there was an impact of the year 2020. Again, we know that this was an exceptional year in our system. There were a lot of external factors that affected how our system could function, but we've also seen an amazing community rallying together to respond and see some improvements to our system. So we did see a decrease in the number of households that were able to be served by emergency shelters in 2020. And we know that that's related to capacity changes due to the need for social distancing to avoid the spread of COVID-19. However, the proportion of clients that were in those emergency shelters that were connected to permanent housing destinations increased. And so although fewer clients could move through, the number of those clients that did move through to permanent housing was higher. So that's incredible work by our emergency shelter system. So we also want to note that people who do exit to permanent housing destinations through our system are likely to remain stably housed 2 years later. So this is that returns to homelessness within 2 years metric that lots of our service providers are very familiar with. So 9 in 10 of people who do exit to permanent housing destinations have not returned to the system 2 years later. But we also do want to note that non-white clients who exit to permanent housing destinations are relatively more likely to return within 2 years. So of that 1 in 10, those folks are more likely to be either Hispanic or Latinx, Black, or of mixed race. And so that is something that's very important to note, is that our system still has to pay a lot of intentional attention to those returns to homelessness, because that is a place where we do see a racial disparity. And so here's just some of that data. This is from our racial disparities report that any of you who are interested can access on the ECHO website, where you can see that about 44% of folks who exited to permanent housing destinations in 2019 were Black, but of people who returned to homelessness from those exits, 58% were Black. So you're seeing that there's a disproportionate number of returns amongst our Black clients who exited to permanent housing destinations just within 1 year. And then we've also seen that those returns happen within a shorter period of time for our clients of color. So relative to white clients, Black and Hispanic Latinx clients who return to homelessness do so within a shorter period of time from their exit to a permanent housing destination, which shows us the degree to which that housing instability is disproportionately experienced by non-white clients. Just something that we really need to build out a response for in order to close that racial gap. So part of this issue of racial disparities in our system is related to our staffing. So we did do a survey as a part of our process of building out our racial disparities report of homelessness response system service provider staff. And this was entirely anonymous and optional, and could not be tracked back to the person who responded. In our survey results, we did find that a disproportionate number of staff overall were white relative to the population that we serve, and that the more senior a position at an organization, the more likely that that position is filled by a white person. So we found that executives and board members were most disproportionately white relative to less senior members in organizations. So this is an opportunity that our entire system has. And I also want to note, I know that I'm an ECHO staff member, but ECHO is not exempt from this trend. This is something that we are seeing across, basically our entire system. And so this is an opportunity for us to have meaningful and authentic representation from the groups that are disproportionately impacted by homelessness in those decision-making roles, so that we can really see the change of the tides in some of these racial disparities that remain. So here's just a visualization for what I just touched on, where, as you can see, the dark blue bar at the bottom here is the proportion of each group that is white. And as one moves up to higher levels of decision-making, the proportion of that group that is white increases. So it's pretty stark overall. And the most, racially and ethnically diverse group is within non-leadership roles. So I will go ahead and pass it over to Mason to talk more about our homelessness response system clients.
Yeah, we're gonna introduce some demographic characteristics. Quick note on the data. This comes from people who were enrolled in the system in some way in 2020. So that could be an emergency shelter enrollment, a street outreach enrollment, permanent housing, coordinated entry. These are people who participated in programs that were in our HMIS. So let's go to the next slide. So here we're seeing the gender and age distributions for that group. Note in the gender, the most common gender seen is cis male, but there is also about 37% cis females, and then about 1% of the clients were transgender or gender nonconforming. Age distribution, you can see there's pretty much anything from 0 to 70 is very common, and it's extremely common to see infants in the system. One of the most common ages is 0. Next slide. Here we see household size and some subpopulations. Most people in the system are single, experiencing homelessness on their own, but about 9% come in households larger than 1. And then that's reflected, as you can see in the subpopulations, by the families with children. Most non-single households do include children. And also it's very common in our system for people to be domestic violence survivors or experiencing chronic homelessness. And that chronic homelessness number is in fact larger than most other similar COCs, being large urban COCs, and something we need to focus on. And then here I think is the clearest way to see that racial disparity that we talk about, where you can see that Black people make up only 8% of Travis County residents, but 35% of the people who interact with our system in a year. That is a huge disparity. Whereas you can look at white people making up only 32% of people experiencing homelessness, but nearly half of Travis County residents. It's incredibly stark. And that leads us to the next slide, where, Black people are making up a small proportion of the Travis County residents, but more than 1/3 of the people experiencing homelessness. And Black people are, I believe, 6 times more likely to be experiencing homelessness than a white person in Travis County at any given time. And then that comes from the Black community in Austin Travis County being vulnerable to many of the risk factors of homelessness, and having a higher inflow into homelessness than other demographic groups. So This next plot shows that for areas of Travis County where we have a higher than median Black population, those areas are more likely to experience rent burden, overcrowded rentals, evictions, gentrification, and people lacking health insurance. And all of those risk factors, some more obviously than others, lead to people experiencing homelessness and housing instability. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Mason. So another thing that we've really been focusing on in our recently published reports is the remaining needs and gaps in our system in order to, address some of the disparities in just our overall system needs that we've touched on a little bit. So the first thing that really just needs to be mentioned in every conversation is that we need more housing units and we need more available program slots in order to meet the need for people experiencing homelessness that need housing in our community. And we've talked about our coordinated assessment, our new prioritization tool, and it's really just important to think about that prioritization is only necessary because we don't have enough units and services for everyone. This would just be a conversation about coordination and not about prioritization if we actually had the capacity to serve the entire population in need of services. So we really need a significant expansion of permanent housing programs in our community for not only just families, but also singles, like Mason mentioned, that really a large portion of the population in need of services are single or adult only households. And so we need services for those folks as well, and really a massive expansion. So these visualizations come straight from our needs and gaps report, which you can also find on the ECHO website on our data and reports page. And here we're looking at the needs by program type for our single households and then also for our family households. And I want you guys to note that the scale is different here. So our need for single households is really quite massive, particularly for our permanent housing intervention types. So permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing, and that we do have more of a gap in our need for permanent supportive housing for singles relatively to any of these other additional needs. And feel free to dig more into this in our needs and gaps report, which has a much more thorough analysis than this, and we'll link you guys to that. So we also do want to note that our system contains a disproportionate number of programs that have specific target criteria for their clients that they serve, and that those target criteria cannot be met by a majority of people in need of housing. And so really something that we want to consider while we're taking on this effort of expanding our housing capacity tremendously is that we need to scale up that sort of general housing, the generalist housing program types. So those housing programs that can serve anyone and don't have as many specific target criteria that are excluding some of our, middle-aged singles who don't fit into a lot of those criteria that we are seeing that we have so many people in need of in our system data. And another thing that our system needs to do that I touched on before what I really just want to leave on this, because it really is such an important conversation for our whole system to be having in these spaces where we're all together, is that we need to work as service providers to increase our representation of non-white communities at every level of employment, and to really focus on decision-making roles where we're seeing a bigger gap. And that we have these known inequities in inflow to homelessness and returns to homelessness for people of color in our community, and that we know that these gaps could be better closed if we had a system that was more representative of the population that we serve. So leaving y'all on that note, and then just a couple more plugs here at the end, is that if you want more data, we've got a webpage on our ECHO website that digs into the Austin Prioritization Index. There is so much good information there. That's an incredible resource that we'll link you guys to. And then both the Needs and Gaps report and the Racial Disparities report for 2021 can be found on our Data and Reports webpage. And there is sort of a synthesis blog post that ties together both needs and gaps and racial disparities on our ECHO blog that we will also link you guys to. And we've also got a homelessness response system dashboard on our linked from our ECHO website. We've got this short link that we can link to everybody to go straight to this page that I've screenshotted here. And you click that go to dashboard button, and there is a ton of information, probably more information than any individual one of you wants. So please feel free to explore that and poke around, and to help you guys really be able to navigate and orient yourself as you go through that. There is a dig into data blog post that we can also link y'all to that includes a video of the three of us talking about the dashboard and clicking through all the different functionalities of that. So thank you guys for your time, and I will quit sharing and pass it back over to my colleagues.
Since we have a few minutes, just wanted to say a little bit more about the dashboard, because I think you probably noticed in this presentation that we were referencing a lot of data from 2020 and 2019, because the reports that we put out, it makes sense to kind of provide that data at an annual level. But one of the things that we're excited about with the dashboard is that we are updating the dashboard on a monthly basis. So if you want to see permanent housing move-ins, capacity updates, even enrollments and returns to homelessness, we're trying to update that data. We are updating that data once a month. And so that's one of the, I think, exciting things about the dashboard itself. So, and in that video, we really we do a demonstration of the different features of the dashboard, especially if you want to really dig into some of those details. I think it's all there in the video.
Thank you, Akram, Claire, and Mason. That is a lot of information that you synthesized very clearly and accessibly and digestibly. So thank you. I know that's not an easy job to do. So we are wrapping up our all stakeholder meeting now. I have a few kind of announcements and reminders, some of which you've heard throughout this meeting. So I've dropped the link in the chat a few times, but the committee's application is open through Sunday. Please apply if you are interested. If you are not selected to be on a committee, you can express your interest in joining work groups, and that information will be passed on and kind of streamline the process to get the work group seated. And so you are very likely to be assigned to a work group, even if you are not selected to the committees. We have gotten a lot of applications and there are a limited number of voting seats. So Please don't take it personally if you are not selected. These seats are also the slates are renewed. And so just because you're not selected this time does not mean you will never, ever, ever again serve on a committee. We also have a few vacant seats on Leadership Council. And so there is a funder seat, a seat for workforce development and education, and then a seat for a community advocate. So that application can be found on the ECHO website as well, in the Coalition Leadership webpage. It is a longer, more involved application than the one to join committees. There are a few kind of questions that require a bit more thoughtfulness and time in answering, but we would certainly love to have y'all join the Leadership Council. And if you have any questions about either committees or Leadership Council, please feel free to reach out to me. You all should have my email address as I sent out the calendar invite, but I will put it in the chat in a second as well. Brian and Ruth are the chairs of Leadership Council and are very available and happy to talk through what kind of participation on the council looks like. So if you have any questions or want to just get a little bit more clarity about what the kind of practice of sitting on Leadership Council looks like before applying, you're very welcome to reach out, and we're happy to talk through that with you. As I mentioned, I will be sending out a survey to you all to get a little bit more feedback on how we can make this space more community focused and really include your voices in how we share this time together moving forward. And that includes how frequently you'd like us to get together. So right now it's twice a year because that is the HUD mandate. We can certainly see each other's faces more often if that feels useful or helpful to you all. And as Claire mentioned, there are all of this information that has been presented on is on the ECHO website. The reports, the dashboard, the recording of this event will also be posted on the ECHO website, along with the recording of the Austin Prioritization Index kind of launch event that we had on our Facebook Live and recorded. So that is up there as well. There's a ton of information on the ECHO website, so please feel free to scroll through that. And if you have any questions on where to find things, again, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to chat and get to know y'all better. So please don't hesitate to do so. And I think that is a wrap for today. Thank you all so much for coming on a kind of bleary and cold Thursday morning. So I appreciate this chance to connect with you all and get to know you a little better. And thank you again. Bye, everybody.